and welcome to this month's episode of Track Talk Live. I am Miss Choo Choo, and I am joined here with Mr. Clickety, and we are here to answer your questions. So by all means, start asking your questions in the chat. There's a little box below this that's outlined and says Track Talk Live, March 2019. Start dropping your questions in there, and with the time allotted, we'll try and answer as many as we can, or all of them. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you've been and where you're going in the next month here, Mr. Clickety?
Yes, well, I wanted to mention that I will be at the RPM East meet in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, this next weekend. So it's the 24th, 25th, I think, 26th. I fly out actually the 20th, but I'll be actually going to the Strasburg Museum in Pennsylvania, which is the Pennsylvania State Railroad Museum.
Okay.
Really a good museum, and they got some good stuff. And they're running steam trains already. I mean, it's spring down there.
Wow. They're already thought out. They're ready to go.
And I have a childhood friend who lives there, and he's a docent at Strasburg. So I'm going to get the super tour.
You're going to get the inside scoop.
The super tour, yeah, and I'm excited about that. So just as far as questions go, I thought I'd show these just to get people thinking.
Get people
but
thinking.
These are two things, in the last couple of weeks I've been working on, I haven't really been doing a lot, but I've been working on mainly loads for open cars.
Oh, okay.
And maybe by the next show I'll have some things to show, but I wanted to hold these two things up and see.
Got some straws here.
Well, we're talking about strange tools and things, and see if anybody has any particular uses for these. And they can see, it's a little, just to get people
Give people a little quiz.
Yeah, just to see what would you use these things for. There's just two different kinds of straws, and one of them is a flexi straw. So anyhow, I just thought I'd bring that up. But
speaking of tools, I will mention, if you're thinking about using straws or any household appliances, if you look below the chat, we actually have a banner that's 10 household items that you can use in your model railroad scenery. So if you click on that banner, you can download our PDF and maybe get some other ideas of cool tools to use that you can find around your home.
Well, perfect. We want to see some comments for sure.
Yes.
I'm going to start out with my first picture. I just want to show this one. It's kind of a crazy picture, but I bought this picture from it was actually at a railroad swap meet, but it's actually a newspaper file. And this is not a picture of my layout, by the way. But just kind of, it's almost, I think it's almost frameable. I mean, it's just it's such a curious picture, but just to show weathering on freight car trucks. And this is probably more steam era, but you can see that these are the old standard bearing trucks. They're not like modern roller bearings, and so there's a lot of grease. The wheels are all greasy.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought I'd show that picture. I had it in my stuff. I just thought it was kind of a curious picture.
An interesting one to show.
Yeah. So hope your layout doesn't look like that.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Okay, now this actually is my layout. This is a building I have been working on, and I think maybe I mentioned before that I've been working on an interior. But I just thought I'd show this. I've still got work to do on it, but I actually got that coastal name off of, I just went to Google Images and I found it. I was just scrolling through, wanted to find something that had a kind of a, California sort of a feel to it. So, and I built the flower box there, and you can see a little bit of interior just through the window there.
Yeah.
And I do have lights. The lights aren't on in this, but I do have lights in there. And then I bought an Gscale phone booth.
Yeah, I see that there.
And there's a power pole. You can see the transformer and the power pole. So anyway, just people can send in comments and critique my work. See
what you've been working on. Yeah.
This is a neat shot. This is over at Bill Briggs' layout, and a guy that I worked with. And so on the left is the Bill store, which was actually a sign that took a photograph in Bill, Wyoming.
Bill, Wyoming.
And the name of the store was a general store, was named the Bill store. So I thought I should have a sign, so I did that. And then Bill's wife's name was Judy.
Okay.
So we had the Bill store
and the Judy
store. So we got them both represented in one little scene there. But Bill set up all these motorcycles and everything. I thought that was, it really tells a story, I think.
Yeah, all those people there.
In a very small space, what you can do. This is another shot of Bill's layout. A lot of real rock built into this. And you can see in the distance in the rear right is a mining complex. And then the mountains in the background are actually painted by a local artist.
Wow.
Actually was an art teacher, and he came out and painted
Did
entire
he
backdrop.
airbrush them, or was it like acrylic? Or
Hand painted. The guy was so good, he could do it so fast. I mean, this is a huge layout, about 3,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And he did a wall. He could probably do, you know, he could probably 20, 30 feet of wall in one day.
Wow.
And we had pictures, or Bill did, had pictures of kind of the typical scenery out there. And so we would show Andy, the artist, pictures, and then he could recreate whatever we wanted in the sky and everything. Just a fantastic artist. But I really like that scene. You can see a train underneath that green boxcar. You can see another line that comes out under a bridge there, just to the right, in the very bottom of the canyon, if you look real close.
Yeah.
The trestle there is custom built to fit the scene. And that's the spur that goes over to the mine, that trestle in the foreground. Okay. This is on that same layout, and this was built by a local modeler named Ed Romo, and I want to just, you know, I want to give him a shout out because this is scratch built.
Wow.
Just a fantastic model, so well done, and he donated that to Bill's layout.
Wow.
But you look at the
Scratch-made buildings.
Yeah, look at the roofing. You know how nice that is, the tin roofing and everything. Really cool. This is oh gads, and I can't remember where it was anymore. These are some of my old pictures. I don't have any new ones this week really, but this was, I think this was out in the Los Angeles area somewhere. But this is actually an ON3 model of the Southern Pacific narrow gauge diesel that ran in the Owens Valley up until it was all abandoned in the early 60s. But I think the model is really cute. But the main thing is I wanted to show the track work.
Oh,
how nice the track work looks, and the weeds growing up in between
they got a lot
the
of
rails.
like foliage going on in there.
Yeah,
very intricate.
It's you know this is out near Death Valley, and you know, this kind of a desert, scrubby sort of weeds and everything, and I just think that's a fantastic picture. Just simplistic, but very well done.
Yeah.
This, you know, I mentioned this on one of the other shows. This was out in, when my son and I were out on a Civil War tour out east, and I wish I could remember the name of the town. It was probably in Virginia, but this was a diorama that I mentioned that was so well done in modeling. And this was a semicircular, it had a glass front, semicircular display that was, maybe a foot and a half, 20 inches deep. And the guy did this incredible use of forced perspective.
Yeah, because it looks a little bit like a painting, but also like 3D. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there is painting in the background, but then actually like that falling down building there, what he did was, the amazing thing is in building even this model in the foreground, it tapers to force the perspective. So that actually the brickwork in the foreground is bigger than the brickwork in the rear of the building. But then as you go further back, even there's a whole pile of loose bricks way in the back, and those are even smaller yet. I mean, it's a fantastic piece of modeling, and this, of course, isn't anything to do with model trains.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's just so well done. These are some just real pictures I found. This is a building that actually is gone now, but we talk about detailing the backs of buildings. This was, you know, I thought this was interesting. Look at all the pipes and wires and
everything that's hidden in the back.
I mean, it just gives you a lot of neat ideas for how kind of the trash can, how junky buildings can look in the back. You know, I was driving by and I saw that.
Paint falling off.
I took a picture. Yeah, I thought that was neat. This is the one I wanted to show. It's just because I love it. This is our local steam locomotive. This was taken last summer, but sitting in its shop. But they were getting it ready for a trip that it was going to do, and just look how shiny that thing is.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. Just look wonderful. So
spick and span.
It was, the shop door was open, and I just thought I had to take a picture of it because it looks so nice in there. Okay, this is another one. I'm going through my archives of pictures, so they're scattered all over. But this, anybody recognize this?
I do not.
This is the General from the Great Locomotive Chase.
Oh.
And it's in Georgia. The original name was Big Shanty. This was where actually the locomotive was stolen about maybe a block from this location.
It was stolen.
Well, you ever see the Walt Disney movie, The Great Locomotive Chase?
I have not.
Well, you're going to have to see that.
I'll have to do my homework.
Well, anyway, yeah, Walt Disney really kind of made it famous, but this was a bunch of basically Union, you know, they were referred to as spies back then, who went down to steal a train and they were going to dismantle the railroad on the way and wreck the railroad so the Confederates couldn't use it. But
Wow.
anyway, it became famous because of the story of the Great Locomotive Chase. And so this is in a building and preserved, and it's kind of, the locomotive has a lot of history. It's pretty neat that it's preserved. This one, now see, we're traveling all over the country. This is a shot. I was in Ely, Nevada.
Oh.
And Ely, Nevada is in the middle, pretty much right exactly in the center of Nevada, and there's like nothing out there.
Not much else out there.
I don't know if you ever heard that, you can drive the loneliest highway in the United States,
Is
Highway
in
50.
Nevada.
This, the loneliest highway in the U.S. goes right through Ely.
Ah, okay.
Is the route of the Pony Express. In the old
Oh.
days. But anyway, I was in the shop, and the neat thing about this Nevada Northern Railroad is a lot of their equipment was bought new when there was a mining railroad.
Yeah.
And it was they never got rid of it.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's new and it's still there. But I love the detailing in this shop photo. The light just happened to be right, and you can see all the overhead detail in the shop, the lighting, and then those the funnels that they would build for the steam locomotives so they could have them running inside the shop, and then they'd funnel the smoke outside through the roof. But I just thought, it was just an accident, but I just thought it was a real artsy photo. I just really liked the,
Some interesting lighting going on.
Yeah, the lighting was great, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and the rails buried in the floor, and just a neat picture. Now this is another one. This is in Fish Camp, California.
Fish Camp?
Camp.
Fish
Camp, California, over near Yosemite Park. And there's a Shea locomotive inside of the building there, but I mainly took the picture again. It's narrow gauge, by the way, 3 foot, for modeling purposes. I mean, look at that. Don't you just want to model that scene?
Yeah.
It was so great. The old wooden building and the stuff sitting around. I just thought it was a wonderful, wonderful shot. And I guess that's all I have in pictures. Another thing I wanted to mention, though, is kind of neat. I've been doing, in the last couple of weeks, I came across a YouTube site.
Oh.
And it's through I'm real fascinated with the history of the Southwest. Death Valley is one of them. And so there's actually the website is dvconservancy.org. But these people did a really interesting thing. They're trying to recreate a model of the old 20 Mule Team ore wagons. Have you seen pictures of those?
I haven't seen any.
Well, 20 Mule Team borax.
Oh, yeah, that sounds a lot more.
Anyway, they actually mined the borax in Death Valley, and they had these incredible ore wagons. And I don't have a picture. I wish I did right now. But anyway, so on YouTube, I came across these people who were commissioned to rebuild some of these ore wagons.
Wow.
And there are some sitting around in Death Valley, some of the original ones that are kind of getting deteriorated.
Yeah.
But they built new ones using the original, pretty much the original procedures.
Wow.
And these are huge. I mean, one of those huge wooden spoked wheels in the back of one of these ore wagons, it was close to 1,000 pounds.
Wow.
And they're made out of wood.
Very
They had
heavy.
a steel rim.
Yeah.
But this is an outfit called Engel's Coat Shop in Joliet, Montana, that was commissioned to build these, and they're actually a carriage building shop, and they build all kinds of carriages and stagecoaches and everything. But if you go on to YouTube and you see, I mean, I love models. I mean, this is recreating something full scale.
Yeah.
But the amount of expertise and talent you need to recreate these wagons even now, and you imagine what it was like building them back in the old days. But I think you can either go to the dvconservancy.org or Engel's Coat Shop on YouTube, and you can look it up, and they have a step-by-step YouTube videos of how they built these wagons,
these big wagons
and the wheels. It's just absolutely fascinating. I love it.
All right.
So that pretty much covers everything I was going to say.
All right, well then we'll get into the questions. I see a few in the chat, but by all means, keep asking them. I see we have a little back and forth in there too, so I'll try and read through it there. Our first question is from Andrew, who asks, are NJ International double pole switch monitors still available? Motors, sorry.
Oh, those things, probably not new. I doubt it new.
Yeah.
Unless you find them in a hobby shop or something. NJ quit making them years ago, and there were some other, Chemtron made them, PFM made them, and they're all pretty much the same design. I think they're all made in Japan. But, the technology has changed so much.
Yeah.
And those dual solenoids took so much electricity. They just needed a huge jolt to throw
Yeah.
that solenoid over. And so the technology has kind of gone the other way. I mean, the most common switch motor nowadays is the Circuitron Tortoise, which is a low current DC motor.
Yeah.
So unless you really, for some reason, really want that dual solenoid machine, I would maybe try to upgrade a little bit, go to a more modern technology.
Switch to a tortoise, maybe. Our next question is more of a little bit of a comment, too, from Chandra, who says, I'm a complete newbie. My parents told me girls did not play with trains, and my spouse years later said model trains were for grown-ups. I'm now 63, female, and retired. Is it too late to start because there's so much to learn?
Chandra, hey, I like it. No, hey, you can start at any age you want. I mean, if you have a passion for trains and you like building models, or you're interested in the history, I mean, the model railroading is such a great hobby because there's so many different aspects to it.
Yeah.
So you just find your little niche, whatever you want to do, and go for it. And I would be happy if Chandra wants to send in any specific questions. I'd be happy to help her out. We want to see women in model railroading. I think that's great.
We also, Chandra says she's going to the Tyler TX show this weekend, so maybe in Texas. Have you ever been to a show down in Texas or heard of the Tyler TX?
No, I've been through Texas, but I haven't been to a show. No.
Yeah.
Let us know. Let us know how that show is.
All right, our next question is from Andy, who says, I've been having a problem with my trains hesitating and stopping even in my rail yard where there are power drops on each track. I took my NCE power cab and trains to my cousin's layout and everything ran fine. Do you know what could be causing this? We are planning to rewire everything if we need to, and he's bringing his Digitrack controller to my home before we change it to see if that helps. I have a 4x8, so it's not that bug, and his setup is a 20x8 foot, and all my trains and controller ran fine on that.
Well, it doesn't sound to me like it's a wiring problem. It sounds to me like something else. I mean, if you took the same locomotive over to your friend's house and that worked, then I would assume it's probably some kind of a track issue. But, funny things can happen to your track, and I would make sure, maybe if it isn't dirty, it could have some kind of corrosion on it.
Yeah. It says that Andrew recommended cleaning the track with a Bright Boy first, and Andy said, I've cleaned it over and over with Bright Boy and alcohol, but it's still doing that after he cleaned it, so...
Well, another thing is, I wonder if it could be a short somewhere, not a dead section so much. I mean, with all that wiring, I can't believe it's going dead. So it could be possibly a short, that's intermittent short that's causing some problem. Yeah, if the track is clean and you can bring all your equipment over to your friend's house and that works, but about all you can do is segment your layout with your, separate your feeders. Sometimes you have to do that, just process of elimination, and see if it's just all over the layout or just sections of the layout. So you could segment your bus wire and just try it in sections and see if you can find out exactly where the spot is that's causing the problem.
Where the issue is. Our next question is from Lone Wolf 777 on YouTube, who asks, hey Doug, have you ever seen a beacon light on an HO scale that replicates the light sequence perfectly? I've seen one where they stick up a very bit of small LEDs in there, but have not found where to get it.
Well, there's a lot of electronics out there now, and pretty much every DCC decoder manufacturer has that built into the decoder, and then different types of flashes. Get a Mars light flash, or so. First of all, the other thing is that I found too. Sometimes the LED. Because a lot of those, the flasher actually, it goes bright and dim to simulate the fact that it's maybe rotating or flashing. And so sometimes a small incandescent bulb works better than a LED because the incandescent bulb will actually dim better. So you might try a super mini, say a 1.5 volt bulb instead of the LED, and try that, or maybe a different LED. But generally, I mean, the circuitry in those decoders is great. I mean, I think the actual circuitry shouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Okay, our next question is from Ron, who says, can you discuss the pros and cons of directly attaching track to foam rather than cork, homosote, or plywood?
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually know guys who, in order to accentuate the mainline grade, will put their mainline track on cork.
Oh.
To elevate it above the real railroads want to keep the main track higher, so there's very little possibility of something rolling out onto the main line. All the spurs and all that should, in theory, be lower, so if it's going to roll, it's going to roll away from the main track, so you don't cause an accident. But that said, I've done a lot of that where you could glue, say, a cork or people I know people have used sheet cork, cut sheet cork, just to raise the main line a little bit, and then glue that down to the foam, and then you can glue your sidings and spurs directly down to the cork. Now, the one issue, of course, is that the cork tends to act like a speaker cone.
Oh.
And it can actually, if you're running long, heavy, faster trains, you can actually get noise. And there's different ways of eliminating that. If sometimes you can put a curtain under your layout and kind of muffle it that way. So you have to be careful about that when you put your track directly on cork or on foam, I mean. But you can shave the foam into a roadbed shape, a roadbed embankment, if you want to do that.
More moldy.
What I do is I use
matte medium.
Matte medium when I do glue the track down to the foam, or to the cork for that matter, because the matte medium has the rubbery, it dries in a rubbery form so that it helps deaden the sound.
Yeah, it's a soundproofer.
Same with your ballasting. When you do ballasting on top of foam, then use matte medium rather than say white glue. That way the white glue dries hard, and that would tend to conduct the sound as well.
Yep, the matte medium absorbs the sound. Our next question is from Justin in Richmond, Virginia, working in HOCl, who says, how do you create depth in a layout? Not physical or track distance, but do you have any tips on how to make your small layout look bigger? Sort of, I suppose, what we were talking about with the forced perspective.
Yeah, forced perspective is it, and that's they use that in theatrics all the time. And the prime example, we were talking about Disney earlier. You look at the Disney castle, and the bricks get smaller and smaller and smaller as you go up in the castle to make the castle look bigger than it really is. And I mean, that's a perfect example of you'd certainly get some books on that kind of thing. I know when I took engineering drafting in college, they actually you studied forced perspective. It would be single vanishing point, dual vanishing points, and you like the idea of a railroad track, a straight railroad track going off the distance. It looks like the rails are getting closer and closer and closer, and so. If you have a scene, the single vanishing point, everything in that scene should basically go toward that single point. That would be a single point on the horizon way in the distance. And in the case of like if you're looking at the corner of a building, there might be two vanishing points where each wall goes toward its own vanishing point. But I'm sure that you can get all kinds of great books on that subject. You can go to a library or a bookstore and look for books on architectural drawing them. They use it in designing homes all the time. You know? So that's what I would recommend, and by all means, let us know what you find out. I love that putting theatrics in model railroad.
Yeah, we have a clarification from the last question asking about what do you mean by matte medium, and do you have any brands you recommend? So can you talk a little more about matte medium?
Well, okay, Michael's is pretty much, I think.
The usual recommendation.
I mean that's the typical art store that's all over the country, and one brand they have there is called Liquitex. But you could go into Michael's and just say you're looking for a jar of matte medium, and it looks, when you buy it in the jar, it looks sort of like white glue. It's white.
Oh, but it dries
clear.
Yeah.
And just walk into Michael's and tell the people in there that you're looking for matte medium, and they can direct you right to it. It comes in a jar. Now there's a gel that is thicker. It's used for other things.
Yeah.
But we use gloss gel as an example to make ripples on water and all that. But that's the gloss version.
Yeah.
So matte medium. Liquitex is the brand I can think of right off the bat, but there are others out there too.
Yeah. Okay, our next question is from YouTube again, who says, from Railroad Trucker, who asks, I'm a beginner. Do you have any tips for beginners? Do you have any top railroading tips for a beginner getting started? We have a few beginners today, it sounds like.
Well, hey, first of all, you have to decide. I mean, model railroading is such a expansive kind of a hobby. You have to sort of have a direction you want to go. I mean, you can't do everything. So it's hard to give an answer without knowing quite what you're interested in. But I would say go to museums, go to railroad clubs, go to railroad flea markets, and there's wonderful stuff on YouTube. And by all means, we're here to help you if you have any specific questions. We'd like to help. And there's all kinds of ways that you can get help and direction in what you want to do. So.
Find a beginner subject matter first where you want to.
Let us know more specifics. The size of your room, how big a model railroad you want, all that kind of thing. We'd be happy to help.
All right, our next question is from John Choo-Choo93 on YouTube as well, who says, I'm starting to build an indoor Gscale layout. Any tips on that?
Well, you know, where we are in Minnesota, that's more common.
Yeah.
You know, where the weather is
Not
nice all year
super
round,
friendly,
you know, people like to build them outside. But no, I've seen some wonderful indoor Gscale, and the neat thing, of course, about doing them indoor, you don't have to worry about getting pelted with rain or anything, you know, wind, and so you can do things that are a little harder to do if you're doing it outside, and of course less maintenance. I mean, so and there's a lot available. I mean, I don't. I give them a little bit of a plug, but I deal with people called Only Trains, and it's onlytrains.com, and I do commercial Gscale, which is indoor, and they are, you know, they're really big and they know everything about Gscale, and so you could look them up on their website as well and get some info.
Okay, our next question is from Philip, who asks, does anyone know where to get brass or plastic stencil for putting a railroad crossing site on pavement at an HORR crossing?
Oh, you know, I've seen those, and I don't remember who, did those. But actually, nowadays with laser cutting, if you know somebody that can do laser cutting, you can do it yourself in any scale you wanted very easily.
Yeah.
But I like that. It's a neat piece of detail.
Yeah, if anybody has any information on the stencils, drop them in the chat.
Let us know if I just can't. I've seen them, but I can't think of who made them.
Yeah. Okay, our next question is from Joshua in Phoenix, Arizona, who asks, I have recently been asked to help sell 2 different train sets. One is from the 1920s, the other is from the 1930s. I also have several track side pieces. They are in museum quality condition. I need to find an appraiser to help with downsizing this part of my father-in-law's estate. Do you have any recommendations?
Well, you know, that's a whole different area from real scale model railroad. I mean, there are people who collect that, and there are museums who want that. I would check with museums in your area and see what they have. You can also check on eBay and see if there's anything for sale that would be similar, just to kind of get an idea. But I usually recommend people go to the Train Collectors Association, TCA. They're nationwide, and they generally have meets, regional meets all over the country. So I would look them up online and see if you can contact somebody through the Train Collectors group that would
help you
give
out
you good
there.
information.
Our next question in the chat is from David, who asks, I have a River Rossi HO Pacific locomotive I would like to run, but the flanges are too large to run it on the club layout. Is there an easy way to correct this?
Not really easy. I mean, I know people have actually, this is pretty more in the olden days. I think people maybe wouldn't want to do it now, but you could actually, if you have a miniature lathe, like a Unimat lathe, you could take the drivers off and actually relay them down to the standard size. That's a European flange, not a US type flange. So there are people who have made replacement drivers for those River Rossies, and even some of them actually, some of the very late River Rossies were made to work with what's called an RP25 wheel. So I wish I could direct you somewhere. I don't know. I mean, it may be tough. It may be tough to do it.
Yeah, difficult.
Yeah.
Our next question is from Chandra again. Hi, Chandra.
Hey.
Asking about a little bit about British train history. So we'll trust your British train knowledge here. She's looking for a 19th century British train, HO scale. History is not clear for that time period. So do you know whether or not British trains during that time were German made or UK made?
Well, generally be UK made. You know, the Brits invented trains.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the German trains came later. They got the technology from the Brits.
Yeah.
I mean, the early 1800s, the Brits were doing trains, and so there's a lot of good information out there. And something I would suggest, if you're really interested in British railroad history, go online and check out the National Railway Museum in York, England.
Yeah.
And they have some of the most famous British locomotives on display there. Including the Mallard that set the land speed record for a steam locomotive that's never been broken.
Wow.
So they have a tremendous collection of stuff, and there's another group over there in museum in Swindon, England, where they actually have a shop where they built a brand new steam locomotive using old technology.
Wow.
That runs. And the British people love trains and they love steam locomotives. And there's way more restored trains and locomotives over there per capita than there is here.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So by all means, I like your interest. Let us know what you find out.
Yeah. Our next question is from Joe, who asks, where can I buy a simple point-to-point operation to operate on my track? Point-to-point operation.
Where you can
system?
buy a system. Well, generally you have to build your own layout. I'm not quite sure what he means by system, but there's my layout is point-to-point, and there are track plans out there for people who like switching, as I do. Track planning ideas for point-to-point.
Yeah.
And you can also look at real examples on railroads, switching railroads, local industrial railroads that operate in the confines of a city, and generally they're long and narrow, and they're kind of a great way of getting ideas for a shelf model railroad.
Yep.
So it'd be pretty hard to buy one unless you could buy one that was maybe an estate, or use one where somebody was changing layouts, but. It's easy to design and build your own.
Yeah. Our next question is from Steve in Colorado, working in HOCl, who asks, what procedures work best for desoldering track, and especially switches, to maintain gauge integrity to ensure proper operation and reduce derailments? Desoldering track.
Yeah, if they're already soldered, you can buy what's called solder wick, and it's kind of a braided, like copper sort of a thing, and you get it hot, and then the copper will actually kind of suck up the solder off of the rail. Oh. So that's what I would recommend. Of course, you could file it. Yeah. Depending on how much solder is on it, you can file it off too. But yeah, I'd get some of that solder wick. That's kind of neat stuff.
Cool. Our next question is from Tom in New York, working in HO and N, saying, I used a Cato HO track and want to know what the best way to incorporate an uncoupling device into the yards and turnouts is on my layout. An under-the-track magnet from KD or the small Cato uncoupler sections that are now new with magnet built into the section. Asking if that's an option. And then previously I used the KD uncoupler magnets on my other layout, code 83 track, and they worked fine.
Well, the KD is, they're the #1 in model railroad couplers. And they make couplers for every scale, and, they really know what they're doing. And so, I would recommend using the KD. And if you want to have a magnet in a certain place where you can't just buy, say, a section of track with the magnet in it, you can always cut in a magnet any place you want it. So I would recommend sticking with the magnets. In certain areas you can use electromagnets if you want to, if you're coming down grade, or you have sections maybe where permanent magnet might create false uncoupling, then you can go to an electromagnet and do the same thing.
Okay. Our next question is from Thomas in New Jersey, who asks, working in HO, who asks, on cleaning track, I use a Bright Boy followed by a CRC contact cleaner. What have you found to be the most reliable cleaning methods and products?
Well, those are fighting words.
Those are fighting words?
Everybody kind of has their own thing. I've used a Bright Boy for 50 years, but actually in my Gscale, the standard Bright Boy is a little small, and I've actually been using those foam sanding blocks, like 3M sanding block. And with the foam inside, you can take a bread knife and cut them to whatever size you want.
Oh, yeah, handy.
So that's what I do. I cut them to fit on my particular Gscale. And for where the areas I can't get into, I actually take like a paint stir stick.
Yeah, like we have on the sign here.
And wrap it with fine gauge emery paper, and it does the same thing as the sanding block. And then I try to keep my track clean, so I never really have any serious track cleaning problems. And of course, keeping your room clean is important. But then, as I mentioned, I think in other shows too, I also take my paint stick, and then I wrap a heavy shop towel around it and tape it. And then I just soak that in a little bit of lacquer thinner.
Oh, yeah.
And I like lacquer thinner because it really takes any oil off, and it evaporates really fast.
Oh, yeah.
So you're not leaving
Goes
any
away.
kind of a film on the track.
Yep.
So that's what I'd recommend.
Oh, some lacquer thinner there. Our next question is from Joshua, working in HOCl, who asked, if I wanted to build an HOCl buildings out of wood, how big would they have to be?
Well, you can
HOCl?
build any size building.
Yeah.
There's no limit. to what you could build out of wood. I mean, you want to have interior bracing because wood can warp.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, go for it. I use wood. I use foam core board, and then I think I mentioned I use the post office cardboard boxes.
Yeah.
And those are kind of neat because they are priority mail because they are they're thin but rigid cardboard. And
Yeah.
I like to do a mock-up first.
Yeah, with the cardboard there.
Yeah, like the buildings, the mine layout, like beginning of the show, I showed that hardware store that I built. That was actually built out of post office cardboard. Oh. And so I just do a shape to start out with. And if I like it, I just keep going. Otherwise, I can change the shape.
Yeah.
And that particular building then actually is post office cardboard, but then I sheeted it with an exterior wall surface. So the you know, you can cut in windows, you know, cut window openings or draw window openings on the cardboard and experiment around. So I get the building just the way I want it, cover it with a wall surface and build it, and away you go. Now for bigger buildings, people are using 3D printing, laser cutting. You know, and I went to that show, I talked about the show I went to in Albany, New York, and that was a lot of structures. And, you know, if you have say a big building that might have, whatever, you know, 100 windows.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to do every window.
Yeah.
Individually, so if you have a laser cutter, you can cut those things out, and it's just great. I mean, they're perfectly cut, and you know, once you have the software, then you can alter it and change it, do multiple buildings off the same software. And
Yeah.
the trick is knowing the software. And then I think I mentioned too that the guys I know like to find these places. There are places out there now where you can rent time on laser machines.
That's handy.
So rather than buying your own, which might go out of date, you know, get obsolete, you can
and
just
also be very expensive.
go to a high class. If you have the software, go to a place that has high class cutters and printers, and just rent time on theirs.
Rent some time. Very handy. Our next question is from Ron in Alberta, who asks, I have a DC HO setup that I have used in the late 60s, 70s, 90s, and in the last few years. I have used nickel silver track now, and I want to add some feeder lines. My main wires are 18 gauge wires. Is it okay to add 14 gauge wires as feeders a few places further away than the 18 gauge track?
Well, yeah. I mean, generally what I do is I try to run the bus wire right underneath the track. So the feeders that you have are pretty short, and so you can have a lighter gauge wire. You could certainly use 14. I've used lighter gauge wire on, you know, on medium-sized layouts, and they seem to work just fine. You do, you know, the smaller the wire, you do have a little bit of resistance in there, and you can degrade the signal a little bit. But I've never really had any issue with it. And actually, I use a 22 gauge wire on HO, or even on my Scale, 22 gauge wire, solid wire, as the feeder from the bus up to the track. And my feeders may not be, you know, maybe any longer than say 6 inches or something like that from the bus wire. But you can, when I did my layout, I actually soldered onto the bottom of the rail so you don't see the feeder. You solder before, as you're spiking the track down. But otherwise, you can solder onto the outside web of the rail with the solid wire. You know, the stranded wire can get kind of, you know, funny. You can see the strands, and so I like to use solid wire on the inside web, soldered in there, and then you can always come back with a file and clean it up. And if you clean it up well, you can just barely tell that the feeder is there. But I wouldn't worry too much about the wire size. You're probably doing fine.
Okay. Our next question is from, let me find my spot here, Rick in Arizona, working in HOCl. A lot of HOCl today.
All right.
What is the easiest way to wire track signals to function with Atlas Code 83 track to show turnout positions?
Well, it depends on what your switch control is, how you're throwing the switch. I mean, as we talked about Circuitron tortoises earlier, a tortoise actually has auxiliary contacts on it that will show the switch position, and you can feed, you know, there are circuit boards out there that'll operate signals, or in the old days we used relays.
Yeah.
So yeah, however you activate your switch, make sure you have auxiliary contacts on there that will, generally you want to use a set of contacts to feed your frog if you have an all-rail switch.
Yeah.
You want to feed the polarity to the frog, so that would take up part of the contacts, then there's another set of contacts on the tortoise that will allow you to do any kind of you know, information off of that switch you want, to give you a switch position.
Yeah. Our next question is from Scott, who asks, my grandpa worked for the M&STL St. L /CNW.
I would say, oh, the Louis.
There you go.
I love it. That went by right by my house. Yeah.
For 45 years, and he retired in 1972. He had an American Flyer, both full passenger and 2 freight setups, just a big oval set on pieces of drop ceiling. I always wanted to build a set around it, elevated 3 feet or so, and I still have all his old menus, but we sold the track and trame. That was just a neat fact I wanted to share.
Oh, that is pretty neat. Yeah, I'm very connected with Louis. I could see it from my parents' house, and it was about 3 blocks down. I could walk to the track. And, Cedar Lake Shops in Minneapolis, all of that. Yeah, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
There's some great books out on M&C now.
That's super cool. All right, our next question is from Jim in Ohio, working in HOCl, as most everybody is today. Do modelers typically spray with dull coat their models that have been weathered with weathering powders? Oh, if you've put weathering powder on, do you put a dull coat on top? Mm-hmm. And does a clear coat change the look of the weathering, and is it necessary?
Well, it can. Now, if you buy good quality chalk weathering, it actually has a powdered glue mixed in with it. Mm-hmm. So when you rub the chalk on, it actually the little bit of heat that's generated from the friction actually activates the glue. Yeah. And so it basically kind of glues the chalk onto the car. Now, saying that, generally when you buy a plastic model, it's kind of slippery. So people will put a dull coat on before they do chalk weathering, so the chalk will have something to grab onto. I like to use an airbrush rather than a spray can, because an airbrush will give you a much smoother finish. You know, out of a spray can, it can come out kind of lumpy. So I like to use an airbrush. And the other part of it is, I mean, once I get my models detailed and weathered, and I don't like to handle them that much. Yeah, leave them alone. So you really wouldn't need a top coat of if you use good chalks, and you're not planning on handling your models that much, you don't really need another top coat to seal it. And sometimes it can change the color of the chalk too. You'd want to experiment on something before you do it on a model. Before committing, yeah. We have another question from Lone Wolf 777 on YouTube asking, hey Doug, have you ever seen an ATSF 5000 210-4 in HOCl made? Because I know they make them in brass, but I have yet to see one in plastic. Check Broadway Limited. Maybe. Broadway Limited, I may have done that. They've done some Santa Fe stuff. I know I've seen the brass ones. The only one I can think of would be Broadway Limited. Yeah, it's the only thing that comes to mind. Our next question is from Ken in Colorado, working in Gscale, who asks, any ideas on creating realistic-looking pine trees? Well, the common pine tree in the old days was what they called the bottle brush. You know how to make bottle brushes where you put the stuff in there, then you put an electric drill and spin it around and make the tree. And there's a lot of those still out there. I mean, probably the most common trees that you can buy nowadays, are reasonably priced, are the ones that are, a lot of them are German made, or you can buy them even online now, direct from China that are made over there. But the really good trees, I mean, you can use those as background trees. They're not the best, but for background trees, if you're in a heavily forested area, they're good. And then you want to do some probably really good homemade trees in the foreground where you can see them. So there are, AMSI was one. There are certain companies that make trees for architectural scale models that are really nice, but of course they're expensive. More expensive. So you're not going to buy 50 of those trees probably. But, and there are people actually who go to flea markets. There are people who build trees and sell them. And sell them at flea markets. Yeah, so. Maybe you'll be lucky to find a tree vendor near you. Our next question is from Carl in Arkansas, working in HOCl, who asks, I'm currently looking for a step-by-step, simple electronic project for HOCl model trains. Can you suggest a source? Well, you didn't say quite what. I mean, it could be, like operating signals maybe, or railroad crossing flasher. There is a question after this, but a little more specific. HOCl boats such as tugs, barges, and small pleasure crafts. Asking about, can you suggest a source for HOCl boats? Same person. It's up in New England. It's in my brain. I can't think of it right now, but there's actually a source of HOCl model craft up in New England, and there are fishing boats, tugboats, that sort of thing. I think there are a couple of those are wood kits, and I think there are some plastic ones through probably one of the German importers that you can maybe research that. But Yeah, most of what I've seen has been the kind of smaller, the wooden ones, nice ones have been from smaller craft people up in New England.
Yeah, New England. Our next question is from Dennis in Mesquite, Texas, working in HOO and Scale, who says, I have a 16 by 16 room around the ceiling with a battery Gscale Polar Express train, and I want to replace it with an Oscale Polar Express electric train. Do I need more than one electric fast track for this length of track?
What was the size of his room?
16 by 16.
No, probably not. I mean, I would assume that's enough juice, but then, and it's battery powered?
Battery Gscale, yeah.
Battery powered. Well, if you're going to go to Oscale with an actual power supply, then you might want to have auxiliary feeders around.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure if that's what he's asking, but you know, anytime you're doing that would be 32, 64 feet of tracks. You'd probably want to have maybe half a dozen feeders spaced out along the shelf. And in the commercial installations that I do, then I have my bus wire actually is on the top of the shelf in the very back, so you can't see it.
Yeah.
And then you can just run feed wires from there.
Interesting. Our next question is from Bruce in Montana, who asks, working in Gscale, what is the best way to lay outdoor track? Also, which is better, track power versus battery power, since we were just talking about battery there?
Well, for outdoor and for Gscale, battery is really the common thing. It's so cool.
Really.
I mean, you don't have to worry about keeping the track clean, and you can actually, you can send the signal, airwire, right from your controller straight to the locomotive. Doesn't have to go through the track. So you don't have to worry about the electrical connection to the track. And the Gscale equipment is big enough where you can have you know, a pretty good sized battery.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Has
I mean, I
room
think
for it.
battery power will eventually be available in the smaller scales, but the trick is getting a battery that'll work.
A small enough one too. Yeah. That'll hide in there. Our next question is from Gary from South Carolina, working in HO and O, who asks, where did you get the transformer and LED lights and a price for them? I don't know. That must have been from a previous show.
The LEDs I've actually been buying direct off of Amazon, and they come from a place in Michigan, as I remember. I'd have to get you that information, but if you're buying big quantities, you can get them. You know, they ship them direct from China, and there's generally I mean, I like to buy U.S. as much as possible, but you know, if you're buying a lot of them, you can get them shipped direct from China through Amazon or eBay.
Yeah. Speaking of eBay, I just wanted to read this comment out from the chat of anybody who's looking to like buy or sell specific trains that they may not know if they're still manufactured. Andrew says, if it's not currently made, sometimes there are defunct manufacturers like River OC, HAM, etc. that might have made them, and it's worth searching on eBay for a short time to find it. So when in doubt, just search eBay very hopefully, and maybe you'll find something.
Or local flea markets too, because you might be able to find a junker where you can use it for parts. So by all means,
Our next question is from Anne in Rhode Island, who asks, I moved and had to cut track to move my layout. Do you recommend pins or splices to reconnect your track?
No, she didn't say what scale she's in. Or...
It says I, but I'm not sure if that's right.
Yeah, well, it kind of depends on the trackage. Now, if you think you might be moving it again, if Anne is kind of mobile, maybe you want to keep it so that if you have to move it again, you can move it easily. So generally, if you're putting sections together, you know, you can, there's ways of, it's like putting together your dining room table. You can use pins and slots, and there's aluminum connectors that you can use that hold furniture together and all that kind of thing. That would mean that you can just butt the track together. And then you can have feeders underneath where you can use a plug. And then plug it, so not actually have to worry about the pins. So that's one option. And if you're using, like, say, if this is maybe, say, 3-well, you could certainly put pins back into it and you know, go back to the way it was. But
see what happens.
We like to see these women model railroaders. So keep it up, All
right. Oh, Andrew asks in the chat if he's overstepping. You're not overstepping in the in the chat. By all means, continue to provide information or interact in the chat.
Hey.
We like when that happens.
Hey, yeah, by all means, send us your comments.
We like the back and forth. Let's see, our next question is from Danny, who just is working in the US, working in Gscale, who says, my question is about wiring. I'm using a 14 gauge wire for my bus line. Can I have 2 open line ends, which is 23 feet, or should I only have 1 open line, which is 30 feet, for DC or DCC?
Well, generally speaking, because you're, in any wiring, your signal can degrade a little bit, especially with DCC. Mm-hmm. This is DCC, he said?
They asked DC or DCC.
Oh, either one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, especially with DCC, you have a lot more information in the, in the wire, so it can degrade. But what I normally recommend is put your power supply in the center. That way, it spreads out both directions, so it's only degrading half as much.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Just put it in the center and then have 2 stub ends.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to have any trouble unless you had a huge model railroad.
Yeah,
but,
a really big set.
A standard model railroad, I think you'd be fine.
Mm-hmm. We have a comment from Facebook from Edward, who says, I've left my layout unfinished for years. I wish I could get inspired to finish it. So do you have any tips for getting re-inspired to model, or things that make you inspired to want to start modeling, or what really gets the creative juices flowing?
Well, for me, it's going to these shows.
Yeah.
I mean, what I like is, I know the guys in this area, and I kind of know their techniques and things, but, there's always more than one way of doing anything.
Yeah.
And sometimes a brand new guy in the hobby comes up with a whole new idea that nobody ever thought of. And so if you go to these different cities and see, meet these modelers and see what they're doing, it's so great. I just love it. It really inspires me to get my creative juices going.
Yeah.
So I would say go visit a club, a railroad museum. Even looking at real railroad equipment gives me ideas ideas I can use for modeling. By all means, just get out and about and just take it in and
see what inspires.
Yeah, and let us know of anything specific. We'd love to talk about it.
Yeah. Our next question is from Charles in Pennsylvania, working in HO&N, who asks, do you have any information on kits or models available of the Best Friend, which ran from Charleston to Hamburg, South Carolina during the 1830s?
Okay, this is taxing my memory again, but I think
a lot of memory questions today.
The Best Friend of Charleston, I think, was a plastic Lindbergh kit that was out, it's many decades ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have ever seen one recently. I wish I could help you on that one. I just don't know. You could try, try eBay.
Yeah.
Try searching eBay, see if there's anything out there. Yep, sorry, I don't know. I'm kind of at a blank on that one.
Yeah. A lot of eBay is the answer to a lot of things.
Yeah.
You might not find what you're looking for, but at least it's a good place to start. Our next question is from Dave in Ontario, Canada, working in HO and Gscale, who asks, what's the best technique for building a lift-out section? Or is it better to go with a flip-up, flip-down, or a swing-out section?
Well, actually, a lift-out is pretty convenient because you get it out of the way.
Yeah.
A drop-down, if you drop it down, you can bump into it and break it and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, I like a lift-out. And we mentioned earlier, if you go to the like the framing section of, say, Home Depot or a place like that, they have these aluminum things now that you can use for hanging pictures. So you put like one kind of angled aluminum thing on the wall, and there's another angled aluminum thing that that the picture hangs on. And there's all kinds of neat stuff that that you can buy for picture hanging. So you can use that for. In the old days we used to use wood, but it's hard to get everything precise when you have a lift out with wood.
Yeah.
And so I like using these aluminum pieces, and I just bought some the other day to do some lift outs for underneath my layout, lift out panels, not a track issue, but actually lift out panels to hide all my stuff underneath. So that's what I'd recommend. Look at framing materials.
All right. Our next question is from Chandra, who asks, what's your favorite method to build mountain scenery, as there are many?
Well, it depends on how big your mountain is. And in the old days, we used shop towels soaked in HOCl. We'd get a big kind of a kitchen dishwashing tub and mix up HOCl and soak the towels and lay it on
over
there. And we started out with chicken wire as a frame with wooden supports.
Yeah.
And then lay metal screen over the top, and then lay the HOCl soaked paper towels over that. And I mean, that's a very strong, if you do multiple layers of towels, it's a very strong surface. I mean, once it dries, I mean, it's real heavy when it's wet, but once it's dry, you can take all that support out, the wood support out from underneath.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's hollow, so you can get into access track that's inside of a mountain or something like that. Nowadays, people are using rigid foam and carving it.
Carving it themselves,
Which is pretty neat. It's lightweight, and you can make a kind of a, a shell out of it, which works great. I've also used this plaster gauze material, which you can buy. You can either buy as a plaster gauze, or you can buy it through Woodland Scenics, their material, which is the same thing. It's just the stuff you make a plaster cast out of. And that already has the plaster built into it. It dries real hard, and so
you don't have to mix anything.
It isn't as messy. You can just soak that stuff in water and put it up, and that. You can buy it in different size rolls and get different size panels. So that's another way to do kind of a more contemporary way of doing it. In the old days, people used paper mache and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I'd say right now that plaster gauze method is really neat. It's just it dries so
cleaner,
fast and hard. It's really a great material, but you still need a base underneath it. So a screen type of base underneath
chicken
it
wire
to support
or
it.
something
Well,
like
in chicken wire, the holes are kind of big, so if it's wet, it can drip through or sag through, and you get up the little sags in the scenery.
Bumps.
So I like to you can use chicken wire to support everything, and then if it's real big, then put metal screen on top of the chicken wire.
There you go. Our next question is from another person named Doug in Washington, working in Gscale, who asks, when handling code 125 rail, should a person make their joints even or uneven by a couple of inches?
There's been a lot of talk about that, especially around here lately in Minnesota. We've had this polar vortex going on. There's been a lot of people who've had track buckle up on their layouts because of things drying out. And what happens is your bench work dries out, and then your track is too big for the bench work, and it wants to kink and all that. And they say, well, is it better to have your track just kink in one place or kink in two different places if your joints are separate? I mean, and I've never, actually, I have never had an issue with the joints lined up. I mean, I kind of do that. It's just easier to do with the track work if you're putting switches and so on. Just kind of lines up. So I think that just doing the joints lined up is plenty easy. You have to be careful because sometimes your track can dip at a rail joint, for example. So if your joints are staggered, then you might have two dips. Where if they're side by side, you can adjust to support that area or whatever you need to do with the joint. So I don't think it's a big deal either way, personally.
All right, our next question is from ELSDP45 on YouTube, who asks, how can you control dust on your layouts?
Well, first of all, being a clean room. And, back in the old days, people had open basements with open joists and everything. The dust would filter through. So basically you want to have a clean room, as clean as you can get it. And also because we were talking about this benchwork being affected, you want to have something with humidity control. If you don't have humidity in your home, in your furnace, then maybe have a freestanding humidifier that keeps your humidity constant year round. And so as far as the dust goes, same thing. You can actually buy a freestanding air filter that circulates through the room.
To get that dust, those dust particles out of there.
If it's going through your furnace filters, make sure your furnace filters are clean. So that's the main thing. I just keep your room clean. Generally, if you keep your room clean, you're going to have very little problem with dust and dirt on the track. You won't have to clean your track as often.
Because then you won't have as much in the air falling on it. All right, it's time for our last question that I have here. And this is from Kenneth in North Carolina, working in HOCl, who asks, how do you keep air bubbles from forming when you're making realistic water?
Well, basically, you have to be real careful with it not to create bubbles. But there's something, and I don't know exactly how this works scientifically, but they say if you blow carbon dioxide on it, if you on your water? There's something about the carbon dioxide that brings the bubbles to the surface. I don't know. But another thing is when I'm doing realistic water, I like to do thin coats. Don't try to do too much at one time. If you do a little bit at a time, do thin coats, take your time, you have less chance of getting bubbles.
I And if not, try breathing real heavy on your
And
water.
breathe on your water. Hey, whatever works. You know?
See if that works. All right. Well, that is all the time we have today and all the questions. So thank you for joining us. Be sure to look and join us next time. I'm Miss Choo Choo, joined by Mr. Clickety, and we will see you next month for another exciting episode of Track Talk Live. But for now, see ya.